Hi there, Ram owners. Today in your 2019 Ram 3500, we're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to install Air Lifts LoadLifter 5000 air helper springs. Now you might be wondering, is airbags the best option for me? And well, that's really going to depend on what you're looking for. If you're wanting something that's completely maintenance free, then I would recommend Timbrens, which are a jounce bumper replacement. The larger Timbren jounce bumper is going to be larger, so it'll make contact sooner with your axle, and it's going to provide more cushion and support than what your factory jounce bumper will. The thing is with the Timbrens is that they don't really offer a lot of cushion. They do make your ride a bit stiffer, but they offer that support that you need. They're also completely maintenance free, so that's a great option if you really don't ever want to mess with it. Now, if you want something that's going to help cushion out your ride, then airbags can be a better option, as you have control over how much pressure and support they're going to be providing. I do also like that you can adjust them individually, so in the event that you do have an uneven load, maybe you've got a very large item that's light on one side, but a long, heavy object on the other side, you could increase the pressure on this side to help level that back out. The Timbrens don't have that option. Another option is a leaf spring enhancement, such as the stable load, which will help increase the contact between your leaf springs so they apply sooner. And I do like those quite a bit, as they are adjustable. They've got different sleeves that you could put in to change how much support those are going to be giving, but those are in set amounts. So while it is adjustable, it's not quite as adjustable as the infinitely variable airbag. Those ones, however, I do like the way they feel on your leaf spring suspension. When you've got them in, they don't quite feel as stiff as an airbag loaded up to a very high amount of pressure. With that being said, though, the stable loads are going to be a maintenance-free option, as they are just metal components you can slide in with various sleeves to choose the amount of pressure you want, whereas our airbags are going to require some maintenance. It's not a whole lot of maintenance. You really never need to get back down underneath here, but as pressures change outside, such as the temperature and the humidity levels, those things all affect the pressure inside the airbag. Now, it might be minimal, but if you haven't adjusted it in a long time, your pressures may be a lot less than what you would expect them to be, so you just need to check these periodically and make sure that they are at the proper pressure that you need them to be at. Before we put our airbags on, we're going to take some measurements to show what our factory ride height is and how that's going to differ when it's loaded up, unloaded, and then with the airbags installed, loaded up and unloaded. Currently, we don't have our airbags installed, and our ride height is about 42 inches here at the rear. And here at the front, we're measuring about 38.5 inches. Now we've loaded it up with about 1,000 pounds of water weight, and we're sitting at about 40.5 inches. And then here at the front, we're at about 39 inches. So in the rear here, we dropped down about 1.5 inches. And that means in the front here, we raised up about 1/2 inch. We've now got our airbags installed, and I'm just outside the shop, so I could use our air supply to air them up. We've gone ahead and aired up our bags with the weight in the back again, and we're going to recheck our measurements now that we've adjusted with our airbags. And here in the back, we're measuring 42 inches, so we're right back to our factory ride height here in the back. And if we check here in the front, we are at about 39.75, so we're only slightly up about 1/4 inch where we were on our factory ride height. That should restore a lot of the lost braking and handling performance that we had due to the geometry that our suspension was at and the way the weight would transfer. By leveling the vehicle back out, our weight can properly transfer to the front tires, restoring that lost braking performance, and also sitting level allows our tires to sit as they're supposed to, getting more surface area contact on the road, increasing traction, as well as your handling, because we're not as on the outer edges as we would be if we were lifted up in the front. Another benefit of having our airbags level our ride back out is our headlights. It'll increase our visibility at night, being able to see, because when your suspension is loaded down in the back without airbags, the headlights tip up and it aims towards the sky, so you really can't see as good as you used to. By leveling it back out, we bring our headlights back down, aiming directly in front of us, illuminating what's in front of us on the road. We've got our airbags installed. We're going to head back out on the test course now. We're going to start by going into our bump stop course. And in comparison here, it feels fairly similar. It still rides very good. The suspension on this truck was pretty stiff and substantial to begin with. I can definitely feel a difference. It does feel a little bit stiffer than it was before. So it actually doesn't feel quite as comfortable, but it definitely feels like if we were hauling more weight than even our 1,000 pounds of water, it would definitely benefit from that. So it almost feels like having the airbags aired up when you have just a small amount of weight. The suspension in this truck can handle it plenty fine. When we go up to a bigger weight, that's when we're going to see the benefit. We're now going to head into the slalom section of our course. And boy, this is where you can notice it the most. That water weight we got in the back really likes to slosh from side to side. And in comparison to without the bags, you can definitely feel that there's not as much side action going on. We're not swaying back and forth as much. Without the airbags, you'd hit the turn and it would really kind of want to move you to the side, and then you'd go back and it kind of throw you. Here the truck feels level almost the entire time. It really doesn't have much sway. And that's pretty impressive when you consider that we're hauling water, because all that mass wants to go to one side each time we go back and forth on the slalom. So for evasive maneuvers, hauling some weight, it's definitely going to make you feel safer inside your truck here. And this is what our airbags will look like when they're installed. They're going to replace your factory jounce bumper and sit in between the frame and your rear axle. They're a double convoluted bag, which helps increase the burst pressure of the bag. And there are roll plates on top and bottom, which also helps increase the load carrying capacity of the bags. These bags have a load carrying capacity of 5,000 pounds. Now you want to keep in mind that it doesn't increase the load carrying capacity of your vehicle. This is just how much weight that these are designed to help support. They have an operating range of 5 to 100 PSI, 5 being the minimum, and this is typically when your vehicle's unloaded. You'll ride around with them on 5. You do want to make sure you got that 5 in there, as if you have no air in here, the movement of your suspension can cause the bags to deteriorate and potentially collapse inwards. So keeping 5 pounds in there helps keep its shape and keep it in proper working order. 100 pounds is going to be our max pressure for these bags. However, I've found that in most cases, you don't usually need to go above about 40 to 50 pounds of pressure to properly support the heaviest load that your vehicle is going to be able to handle. Now, you do have the option to go higher if you want to, but typically at that point, it just starts to stiffen out the suspension even more and make your ride uncomfortable. We'll begin our installation by giving us some extra clearance between our axle and frame by jacking up a little bit on the vehicle. We can place it right underneath the hitch in the back here to help give us some more room to work. So now we're underneath the vehicle, and we're going to remove the jounce bumpers on both the driver and passenger side. So if you look just inside of where your tire is by your leaf spring stack here, you'll find your jounce bumper. There's a bolt on each side of the jounce bumper we'll be taking out using a 16mm socket. Once we get our jounce bumpers out, we won't be reinstalling them. We'll take out the jounce bumper on the other side as well. We'll then pre-assemble our airbag. We've got our airbag here, and the top of our airbag is going to have the 3 holes in it for our air fitting, and the bottom will just have the 2. We're going to put our air fitting on, but we need to make sure we put our roll plate in place first. The larger hole will go around where the air fitting goes, and the other 2 holes will line up with the threaded holes in the top of our airbag. We'll then just thread this in, and we'll use a 1/2-inch wrench to tighten it down. We want to make sure we get at least 2 or 3 threads of the sealant that covers our air fitting threaded down into the airbag. And you don't need to worry about orienting it. The top of it will swivel, so once you've got it tight, we can move on to putting our brackets in place. We'll then place our upper bracket on. We're going to be preparing 2 of these, so just be aware that the top brackets are different. They are labeled with an L and an R for passenger and driver side, L for left driver, and R for right passenger. Both of them are going to have a cutout here that will fit around your air fitting. So you'll just set that up and line the holes in the bracket up with the threaded holes in your airbag. We'll then take the small hex bolts that come in our kit, place a lock washer and a flat washer on them, and then go down through the bracket and the roll plate into the airbag. Once we've got both of these on, we can go ahead and tighten it down. We'll use a 15mm socket to tighten it down. You may need to use an extension to access the one underneath the flange here. Once we've got those tightened down, we can torque those to the specifications found in our instructions. With the top bracket all torqued down, we can go ahead and flip the airbag over, so now we're setting on top of our top bracket. We're going to place the roll plate on the bottom of our airbag, lining up the holes, and then we're going to place our bottom bracket on. The bottom bracket's not left and right or side oriented, so you can just grab one of those bottom brackets and set it on place. We do want to make sure we've got it in the correct orientation when on the bag though. You can see that we've got a nice flat surface here, and these pieces stick out past that flat surface. This is the surface that's going to go against the airbag, and we want this portion to be on the same side as the smaller leg. We can see that this is a nice big thick leg all the way across on one side, but the other one's only like a half leg. So the side that the half is on is where we want these to be. We'll then line up the slots with our airbag, and we're going to secure it using the same hardware we did on the top. This hardware though, we're going to leave loose for now. We just want to put it on about hand tight because we need to be able to adjust it in the slots here at a later step when we're positioning it on the vehicle. And that's what we're looking for right there. We're getting ready to set our airbag in place, but on the driver's side here we do have a vent tube coming from the axle here that's up against this top bracket, and this is kind of going to interfere with installing our airbag. So we're just going to get it out of the way to make things easier. So use a trim panel tool or a flat bladed screwdriver. A pair of side cutters also works pretty good for removing these clips, and just pop this guy right out of here. And we're just going to tuck it out of our way for now. We'll then take our airbag that we've pre-assembled. Make sure you've got the correct one for the correct side. Again, these top brackets are side specific. We're going to work it in place. It is going to be a little tight working it in, but it's not really too bad. Once you've got it sitting on your bottom axle, you want to pull down on the top to kind of compress it a little bit. And work it underneath the upper bracket there. And then we'll slide it over up against our leaf stack, making sure that these flanges do go all the way up against the leaf springs on the outside of the U-bolts on each side. And at the top we're looking to line up the slots here on each side of our ears with holes that exist in the vehicle there. We're now going to start putting some of the clamping hardware that's going to hold our bags in place. We're going to start on the lower bracket. You'll see a square hole that's going to be on the lower bracket. There'll be one on each side of our axle. We'll take the long carriage bolts that come in our kit, and we're just going to slide it down through that square hole. We'll do the same thing over here on the other side. And then we're going to work our U-bolt in place. The U-bolt needs to go around the leaf stack and into the round holes that's on the bracket here where it presses up against the leaf spring. I find that to be usually a little bit easier if we kind of come in from somewhat like the top and then come with the threaded ends facing down and then just kind of pivot to turn it. Just like that, and then just slide it through the bracket on each side. Our U-bolt then we can secure using the flange nuts. So we're just going to thread these guys on, one on each side. We don't need to tighten them yet, just get them on there. We're then going to put the lower clamp onto the carriage bolts that we drop down. There is a small circular cutout here, semicircle, that we're going to line up at the bottom of our axle. So we'll just slide the carriage bolts through the square holes on each side and then secure that with flange nuts. And I like to run it up by hand just to keep it from sliding around too much. We'll now take the upper clamp. This is just a little L bracket with some holes in it. We're going to take the L positioned like this and drop our bolts down on each side. These are the longer black bolts that come in your kit. They're bigger than the other hardware we've been using, a little bit longer. And then we're going to take this with the L facing towards the center of the vehicle. And we're just going to drop down the bolts we put in through existing holes in the frame. If we look up through the bottom, they're going to poke down through the frame and also through our upper bracket, just like you see there. And we can see there where they drop down through the frame, the upper bracket, through there. And then we're going to secure these using a flat washer and a nylon locking nut. So now we're just going to double check our bags, make sure everything seems like it's lined up properly, make any adjustments as we need to. Just trying to make sure that everything looks like it's not cocked to one side. Like we don't want the back to be squished and the other side stretched open. We want it to be fairly uniform and even. Once you've got that, we can start tightening down our clamps. We're going to start with the U-bolts here, and we're going to use a 15mm wrench to tighten those down. You want to work your way back and forth, tightening it down evenly. So we'll tighten this side a bit, and then we'll move over to the other side of our U-bolt and tighten that side. Next, we're going to move on to our bottom clamps, and these are also going to use a 15mm socket. Going back and forth to make sure it's even. And then we'll move up to our top bolts and tighten those down. We'll be using a 15mm socket and wrench for these. And we want to make sure we go back and torque any of the hardware that we've been tightening down to the specifications found in our instructions. And then we can come back here on the bottom now and tighten down the hardware that we left loose during our pre-assembly. We just left this loose, so if we needed to adjust our bag left and right in the slots, we could do so. Again, we just want to make sure that it's even on both sides. That's our main goal. And we can just stick our wrench up in there and snug this down. Make sure to snug down the other bolt on the other side on the bottom here as well. Should have no problem getting a wrench in there. Some of your thicker ratcheting wrenches may or may not fit. Now that we've got the driver's side airbag done, we're going to repeat the exact same process over on the passenger side to get this one installed. Once you have both installed, we can start running our air line to air up the bags. I'm going to go ahead and route this air line now, and then I'll show you the path I took to get it there. Also, once you've got both airbags installed, if you want, you can take your jack out. We no longer need it jacked up. It was just to give us clearance to get the airbags in. So I'm going to go ahead and take mine down since I'm on a lift, so I got plenty of room to stand underneath. If you're working at home and you still want that extra space, you can go ahead and leave it there, or you can get out of the way. When you first open up your air line, you're going to see that it's all one solid piece. So you're going to want to take the two ends, hold them together, and stretch it out until you have them in two equal lengths, and then you want to cut them in half. Now when you cut your airline, you want to use a special tool. We have hose cutting tools here at etrailer.com. You can pick them up if you need some. And the purpose of those is to have a nice clean cut. So you can see here that when we cut this, it's going to be very clean. If you were to use a pair of side cutters or scissors, it would smush the hose and it would deform the end. And we don't want that. It won't seal properly inside of our airbag fittings. So now that you've got them cut in half, we can start routing them. I've already got this one routed here to the back of the vehicle, but we've got extra length. So I do recommend that you start at the back and route your hoses towards your airbag so you can cut off the excess. We're going to go ahead and cut though, and I'll show you how they plug into the airbag here. So I've got it routed to where I want it. I always like to leave a little bit of excess for the future. So we're going to go ahead and do it about there. And then when we cut it, we want to make sure we're cutting it perpendicular to the airline, so that way we get a nice clean square edge. And once you cut it, it very simply just pokes right into the air fitting that we have already pre-threaded into our airbag. So we're just going to push that in. And I like to push it in and pull it out a couple of times because it should lock into place. You shouldn't be able to pull it back out. And that's basically it. We're going to do the same thing over here on the other side. And now I'm going to show you the path that I took to route these. We'll start here on the driver's side. So we come out of our airbag here. We then follow the factory wiring going towards the rear of the vehicle. And it does curve up. We just follow the factory wiring where it curves up. And then we stay over the frame following that factory wiring, zip tying it along the way till we come here towards the back. And what you're seeing here is actually where your license plate would mount, the screw holes for it. We replaced the screws for your license plate. Now our license plate is going to attach directly to the air fitting. Let's hop over here to the passenger side and we'll show you how we routed this one. This one just again comes out, follows factory wiring. Now from here we do leave the factory wiring and go over to the frame, because when we make that jump there's more factory wiring right here, and we're just going to follow that, zip tying it to it. Following the factory wiring is usually your best option because you want to avoid anything that moves that could catch it, like your suspension, and anything excessively hot like your exhaust here, because that could potentially damage your hose. So we stay up above that frame. Once we get to where our exhaust is here, there's no more factory wiring, but if we just stay on top of the frame, we can actually poke the hose down through this large opening here. We just poke it right down in there, and then our air line can come down and plug in. I'm going to quickly show you how the air fittings work here, these quick connects. So the air line's in there and we can't pull it out. And maybe you made a mistake or the hose is too long and you want to trim it some more. To remove the air hose, you'll want to press in on the ring that's around the air hose. I like to use a wrench. I'm using a 10mm here, something a little smaller works a little bit better. But just press in on that ring and then you can pull your air hose right out. When you want to reinsert it, once you've made your adjustments, it simply just pokes in. And I like to kind of wiggle it again and pull just to make sure that it's fully seated so we don't get any leaks. Now that we've got our airbags installed down here and our airline routed here underneath, we can take that vent tube that we had removed before and put it back in place. We were just getting it out of our way. We're now here at the back of the vehicle, and if you look here where our license plate was, I've taken the screws out that held the license plate in, and then I went ahead and enlarged the hole a little bit for our fittings to fit through. I used a 5/16 drill bit to enlarge it, and that will allow our hoses to pass through. I'm going to show you real quick here on the back side of the hose. Before we slide it through, we want to make sure we put a nut on it, as well as the star washer. And now we're going to go ahead and poke it back through that hole. And you can just reach right behind here. I'm reaching from underneath. And that'll just poke right on through. Now, if you are installing your license plate, our customer doesn't have a plate back here, but if you were, you would want to put it on now, and that way it would just slide right over. The holes in your license plate are a little bit bigger than what is on our eTrailer plate here. So it'll just simply slide over those, and then we'll use the nuts to secure our plate to it. Once you slide your plate on, you can then secure it using the rubber washer, flat washer, and another nut that comes in your kit. We'll then tighten these down using a 1/2" wrench. And I like to hold the back side because these don't need to be really all that tight. With the star washer and the rubber washer, it puts some compression on it to keep it from coming loose. And since this is like a brass type air fitting, it's considerably softer metal than the hardware that we're securing it with here, so it is important not to over tighten and strip it out. That's why I'm not using my wrench. The normal way, I'm just kind of using it like this just to snug it down. We can now air up our airbags and check for any leaks. Make sure you don't exceed any of the air pressure, so they do air up pretty quickly, so do it in small bursts and then just check yourself. Now that we've got air in our bags, we can check for leaks. We're going to be using some soapy water to do so, and we want to check at every fitting where we connected our airline. So we're just going to take the solution that we've got here, spray the soapy water on our fitting, and what we're looking for is bubbles. We want to look for bubbles that continually repeat. So you can see it's kind of foamy looking. We've got some really small bubbles there. That's perfectly normal because that's just from us spraying it. If we had a leak, we would see it actually like blowing bubbles. There might be a bunch of little small ones or maybe some slow big ones, but there would be a change. Since it's just sitting there, we're good. We're going to move on to the one on the other side. Check that one. Make sure that they're not getting any bigger because there's a pretty big bubble right there, but since it's not getting larger and just staying the same size, that means air is not leaking out of our bags, filling that bubble up. So we're good at there as well. We'll check the two at the back, and then if there's no leaks there, we are all good to go. Here you can see the bubbles close up, and you can see that they are not growing any, which means that there's no leaks. And we'll check the fittings here at the back. We're going to do these the exact same way, and we have no bubbles coming out of these either, which means our system is leak-free, and we're ready to hit the road. And that completes our installation of Air Lifts LoadLifter 5000 air helper springs on our 2019 Ram 3500.